To try and tackle the population challenges facing Scotland and help grow the economy, the First Minister today called for a specific Scottish visa, which would allow international graduates from our universities or colleges to stay here for an extra 2 years. As migration is a policy area reserved to Westminster, Mr Swinney urged the UK Labour government to work with him to develop and deliver the plan.
We need a renewed focus on an immigration policy that works for Scotland. Have no doubt, right now, we need people to come here to live and work to bolster our working age population. We need them to address skills shortages and to increase our productivity and our innovation. 20 years ago, the Scottish and UK governments worked together to launch a tailored migration route designed to enable international students to stay in Scotland after they had graduated. I see no reason why this cannot happen again.
Well, tonight John Swinney's call was rebuffed by the UK government, with a spokesperson saying there were no plans to introduce a visa route specific to Scotland. But that's certainly not the end of the debate on this. We reflected on the issue with the Stirling University economist Professor David Bell, who's a member of the Centre for Population Change, and Billy Gold, a spokesperson for the Scottish Licensed Trade Association. David, what is the thinking behind John Swinney's call for this Scottish graduate visa scheme?
So I guess there's a couple of things. First is that Scotland does have a kind of demographic crisis. Without immigration, its population will fall over time because the number of deaths is well exceeding the number of births at the moment. And the second thing is that Scotland needs to grow the economy somewhat. And having graduates come into the economy, they're generally more productive than the average person, and that would help boost economic growth. So those are the two main bits of thinking, in my opinion, behind this request by John Swinney.
And David, in John Swinney's speech today, he also mentioned that 20 years ago, Jack McConnell introduced the Fresh Talent Initiative. How similar is that scheme back then to the one John Swinney's, hoping at some point to introduce here?
Well, there are some similarities, and you're right. Jack McConnell did introduce that scheme, probably with the same motives that I mentioned for John Swinney thinking about it just now. The slight difference, I think, is that John Swinney's idea is to link two things together: graduates on the one hand, and what's called the skilled worker scheme, which is the way that the UK as a whole runs immigration. And it's in theory, it's a very tightly organised system. But for a couple of years, we've had very high rates of net immigration. Indeed, Scotland's had very high rates of net immigration, and I suspect the UK government is pretty wary about adding to pressures on net migration.
Yeah, and Billy, as David's saying, the premise behind this scheme is that we don't have enough big enough labour force in Scotland. Would the Licensed Trade Association welcome this scheme like this?
Very, very much so, 100%. You're basically attracting talent and retaining talent in this country. Come here, graduate in a skill possibly relevant to hospitality, what I'm speaking about. A bit of career progression, you're very soon hitting the threshold to become eligible for the skilled worker visa. I think it's a great idea, and if anything, we would like to see even more done, explore the possibility of a Scots-specific visa for certain sectors of the Scottish economy.
So what's the situation in the hospitality industry at the moment? I mean, how badly are they needing staff?
Desperately needing staff. I know people all over Scotland, and I know some people personally who are at their absolute wits' end. They just cannot recruit the staff, the workers they need, which means that their businesses are operating in some cases 50%, 60%, maybe if they're lucky, 75% of the potential capacity. Staff can only work so many hours a week. So some places are shutting 2 or 3 days a week, not because it's quiet, because they don't have the staff. So they're not providing the service, they're not earning the revenues that they should be earning, so they're not paying as much self-assessment, corporation tax, etc. So the economy is being harmed because hospitality has been held back. It's a staffing crisis. It's a really, really desperate situation.
David, what do you make of what Billy says there? He's explained very starkly the consequences it's having on the economy.
Sure. I think hospitality is a sector that's really been hard hit by staff shortages since COVID, and there is obviously a crying need if we want to grow the economy to be able to staff businesses in the hospitality sector. Whether this scheme would make a huge difference to hospitality, I'm not sure. The skilled worker route has certain salary thresholds that you've got to make in order to qualify for that visa. So the kind of John Swinney's idea of having this interim scheme and then move on to the skilled worker scheme would still have issues with it in relation to businesses like hospitality. And I guess I suspect that the argument that the UK government is making is that there are a lot of inactive people aged between 16 and 64 that are not in the labour market. Scotland has about 800,000 people in that category. And there's an argument that we should be finding ways to channel them.
And David, critics would argue or would say that you can't have two immigration systems, within the one country. Could this policy just allow people to use this scheme to kind of come to the UK and then go and work down south? I mean, could that happen?
So what John Swinney suggested was that you use the Scottish tax code to in a way anchor people into Scotland, but they probably have to do that with the consent of an employer, and this would tie the worker to the particular job for a period of time. At some point, that restriction would have to go, and then there would be a risk that whoever had been attracted to Scotland might think, well, maybe things are brighter down south.
I mean, Billy, what do you think the long-term consequences will be for some of these businesses you were talking about if something isn't done?
If we don't do something, some of these businesses will not survive, and some of these businesses have been there since the year dot. And really, we are at the situation, we're not far away now from saying there are businesses that will just need to pull the plug, because it's a people business. You can't work, you can't have a robot serving your dinner, serving your pint. It can't be done by AI. It's a people business. We need people in Scotland who are willing to work, ready to work. And the minute they start working, they earn wages, they pay tax, they pay national insurance. To me, it's a no-brainer. We need to do everything possible and argue every way possible to get more workers into Scotland. We need more economically active people, younger economically active people in Scotland. And I hear what David's saying, there are quite a large number of economically inactive people in Scotland. That's the government's problem to sort that then. What are they going to do about it? They've been talking about it for as long as I can remember. They've done nothing. Up to Brexit, we had the European workers come in, they were hard working.
Yeah. David, do you think the UK government has said that they're not going to, let the Scottish government go ahead with this? Do you think they might change their mind on this?
I suspect that until they get the net migration figures for the UK as a whole down to much lower numbers, they'll not be willing to entertain schemes like this.
Okay.
It's as if they had. Okay.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but we have run out of time. But David and Billy, thank you both very much indeed for joining us.